Welcome to this new book, where we will explore the fascinating world of economics, an essential subject for understanding how our society works and the decisions we make on a daily basis. In this book, we will break down economic concepts in a clear and accessible way so that anyone, regardless of their background, can understand them and apply them in their daily life. This content is an exclusive summary created by us with the aim of providing you with a deep and useful understanding of economics. If you're interested in learning more about these topics and other key aspects of economic thinking, don't forget to subscribe to the Audiomentors channel and activate the little bell so you don't miss any updates. Thank you for joining us on this new learning journey. Let's get started. 1. Economics as a social science. Economics is a social science that studies how people, companies, governments, and other organizations make decisions about the use of limited resources to satisfy their unlimited needs and desires. Although economics deals with money, prices, and statistics, its scope is much broader, as it involves fundamental aspects of human life, social interaction, and the well-being of communities. Economics is not only concerned with markets or finance, but also with how resources are distributed in society, how people make decisions under conditions of uncertainty, and how social objectives are achieved through economic policies. Why is economics a social science? Unlike the natural sciences, such as physics or biology, which study observable and measurable phenomena, economics is based on human behavior, which is much more complex and, in many cases, unpredictable. The social sciences, such as sociology and psychology, focus on understanding how human beings act within social, cultural, and political frameworks. Economics, as part of these sciences, tries to understand how individual and collective decisions affect outcomes in a society. Economics as a social science deals with a wide range of problems affecting human societies, from issues such as unemployment, poverty, and the distribution of wealth, to issues related to education, health, and environmental sustainability. 2. The approach to economics. Throughout history, economics has adopted different approaches and models to analyze how societies manage their resources. Some of these approaches have been more normative, that is, they have tried to identify what should be done to improve social welfare, while others have been more descriptive and have focused on understanding how economies really work. Positive economy versus normative economy. Positive economy. This refers to the study of economic facts and relationships as they are. That is to say, it tries to explain how the economy works in practice, based on observable data and concrete facts. For example, it is possible to study how changes in prices affect the demand for a product or how fiscal policy impacts economic growth. Normative economics. This focuses on what should be. It seeks to provide recommendations or value judgments about what is best for society. Normative economics relates to issues such as social justice, welfare, the distribution of wealth, and public policies that can improve or worsen people's lives. For example, a normative economist might argue that the redistribution of wealth through progressive taxation is necessary to reduce inequalities. The debate between positive and normative economics is central to many discussions in economic policy, as it determines the priorities and approaches that should be taken to address social problems. The interdisciplinarity of economics. Economics is an interdisciplinary discipline that intersects with other social sciences, such as sociology, politics, psychology, and history. Economists use theories from other sciences to understand how social groups, institutions, and power structures affect economic decisions. For example, psychology helps economists understand how emotions and non-rational behaviors influence consumer and business decisions. Sociology provides knowledge about how social norms and values affect economic behavior, and politics is intrinsically related to economics, since political decisions have a great impact on the distribution of resources, the regulation of markets, and the intervention of the state in the economy. 3. The concept of scarcity and the need to make decisions. One of the key ideas in economics is the concept of scarcity. The resources of any economy, whether natural, human, or financial, are limited, while human needs and wants are unlimited. This central dilemma of economics is what forces individuals, businesses, and governments to make economic decisions about how to allocate those scarce resources efficiently. Scarcity and resource allocation. Scarcity means that not all the needs of all people can be satisfied at any given time. Economies must decide how to allocate limited resources, such as time, labor, capital, and natural resources, to produce the goods and services that people need and want. This raises three fundamental questions. 1. What to produce? Given that resources are limited, not all needs can be satisfied at the same time. Therefore, society must decide which goods and services to produce first, based on consumer preferences, production costs, and economic objectives. 2. How to produce. Once they have decided what to produce, economies must determine how to do it efficiently. This includes choosing the right technologies, production methods, use of labor and resources, and business strategies that maximize production. 3. For whom to produce. The final question is how to distribute the products and services produced among the different members of society. Given that resources are limited, distribution cannot be completely egalitarian. Economies must decide how to distribute wealth, which is related to economic policy decisions such as taxes, transfers, and market prices. The opportunity cost. The concept of opportunity cost is central to economics. Every time we make a decision, we give up other opportunities. The opportunity cost is what we fail to earn or use when we choose one option over another. This implies that each economic decision has an associated cost that must be carefully evaluated in order to make the best choice. For example, if you decide to invest your money in shares instead of putting it in a savings fund, the opportunity cost is the possible gain you would have obtained if you had taken the second option. This concept is key in all economic decisions, from personal consumption to government policies. 4. Economic agents and their behaviors. Economics studies how different economic agents make decisions about the production, consumption, and distribution of resources. The main economic agents are consumers, people who make decisions about which goods and services to buy based on their needs, preferences, and available budget. Companies, organizations that produce goods and services, make decisions about what products to manufacture, how to produce them, and how to distribute them. The government regulates the market, establishes economic policies, and redistributes resources through taxes and transfers. The external sector involves economic relations with other countries, such as international trade, foreign investment, and capital flows. 5. The economy in everyday life. The economy is not limited to markets and abstract theories. It is present in our everyday decisions. From the family budget to the public policies that affect education, health, and work, the economy has a direct impact on our quality of life. For example, when we choose between buying a consumer good or saving for the future, we are applying economic principles such as the valuation of our needs and the optimization of our limited resources. Similarly, government policies on taxes, subsidies, and prices affect our ability to purchase goods and services, and therefore our general well-being. Conclusion. In this first chapter, we have established the basic foundations for understanding what economics is and how it works. We have seen that economics is not just a set of numbers or abstract theories, but a social science deeply connected to people's daily decisions and the policies that govern our society. In the next chapters, we will delve deeper into specific aspects of economics, such as supply and demand, markets, and economic systems, to understand how the different elements of this fascinating field interact. 2. Scarcity, needs, and economic goods. One of the fundamental concepts of economics is scarcity, which is at the heart of all economic analysis. Scarcity refers to the situation in which available resources are limited, but people's needs and wants are practically unlimited. This contradiction is what gives rise to economics as a science, as it forces us to make decisions about how to distribute resources in the most efficient way possible. Scarcity, the engine of the economy. Scarcity is a universal phenomenon that affects people as well as governments and businesses. Economic resources such as labor, capital, land, and technology are finite, but human needs are infinite. People always want more of what they have, whether in terms of material goods, free time, health, or education. This tension between the limited and the unlimited forces difficult decisions to be made about how to use resources efficiently. When we say that resources are limited, We mean that although there are a large number of goods and services available, not all of them can be produced at the same time due to the scarcity of resources. For example, time, money, and labor are limited, which means that people must choose between different options to satisfy their needs. Needs and economic goods. Human needs are fundamental to understanding the economy. In economic terms, needs are divided into primary needs. These are those that are essential for human survival, such as food, water, housing, clothing, and medical care. These needs must be met to ensure people's lives and health. Secondary needs. These are those that are not essential for survival, but which improve the quality of life, such as access to education, transport, leisure, and culture. Tertiary needs. These refer to desires that are not necessary for survival or for the improvement of basic quality of life, such as luxury items or exclusive services. Economic goods are those produced using scarce resources. These goods are on the market and have a price, as their availability is limited. Economic goods are divided into consumer goods. These are those that directly satisfy the needs of consumers, such as food, clothing, and medicines. Capital goods. These are goods that are used to produce other goods and services. They include machinery, infrastructure, and tools. The choice dilemma. Since scarcity is an inevitable feature of any economy, individuals and societies are forced to make decisions about how to allocate their limited resources to meet their needs. This decision-making process is known as the economics of choice. Economic choice is influenced by opportunity costs. Opportunity cost refers to what is given up when a decision is made. That is, when we decide to use our resources for one thing, we are sacrificing the opportunity to use them for another. This is an essential concept for the economy, as every economic decision involves an exchange. For example, if a family decides to spend their money on a vacation, they are giving up other possible alternatives, such as saving for their children's education or buying a new appliance. In broader terms, governments must also choose how to spend public money, and companies must decide between investing in a new product or improving existing processes. The Production Possibilities Frontier, PPF. A graphical way of representing the concept of scarcity and choice is the Production Possibilities Frontier, PPF. The PPF shows the different combinations of goods and services that an economy can produce with a given amount of resources. This curve represents the options available to an economy, illustrating how, when a decision is made to increase the production of one good, the production of another must be reduced due to the scarcity of resources. The PPF also reflects the opportunity cost of production decisions. If an economy chooses to produce more of one good, the opportunity cost is the amount of another good that must be sacrificed. Economic efficiency is achieved when resources are used in such a way that it is not possible to increase the production of one good without reducing that of another. The economy and the distribution of resources. In an economic context, the distribution of scarce resources is a key issue. Resources are distributed among individuals, companies, and governments in different ways, and there are different economic systems that regulate this distribution. The three main economic systems are market economy. In this system, resources are distributed according to supply and demand. Prices are determined by the market, and resources are allocated according to consumers' willingness to pay for goods and services. Planned economy. In this system, the government controls the distribution of resources and the production of goods and services. The government decides what to produce, how to produce it, and at what price to sell it. Mixed economy. This is an intermediate system where both the market and the government have a role in the allocation of resources. In a mixed economy, the government regulates some sectors, while the market is in charge of others. The role of economic policies. Governments use economic policies to manage scarcity and the distribution of resources. Fiscal, monetary, and regulatory policies help to balance the economy, control inflation, reduce unemployment, and guarantee social welfare. For example, an expansionary fiscal policy could include an increase in public spending to stimulate the economy in times of recession. Similarly, an expansionary monetary policy, by reducing interest rates, can encourage investment and consumption. 3. Resolving scarcity, innovation, and sustainability. As economies grow, one of the responses to scarcity is technological innovation. Through innovation, new methods can be created to produce goods more efficiently, which can partially alleviate the effects of scarcity. In addition, sustainability has become a central issue in the modern economy, as the responsible use of natural resources is essential to guarantee a prosperous future. The economy must also adapt to environmental challenges, promoting sustainable production and the responsible management of natural resources. Advances in clean technologies, recycling, and the efficient use of resources are strategies that contribute to solving the problems derived from scarcity. 4. Conclusion. Scarcity is the fundamental principle that gives rise to the economy. This phenomenon forces decisions to be made about what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Limited resources and unlimited human needs make the economy a dynamic discipline, constantly adapting and searching for innovative solutions. The way in which societies manage scarcity not only determines individual well-being, but also the future of society as a whole. In the next chapter, we will delve deeper into choice and opportunity cost, exploring how economic decisions are made and how individuals and societies must evaluate the alternatives available to satisfy their needs. 3. Choice and opportunity cost. Decision-making is a fundamental part of economic life. Given that resources are limited, every choice we make involves giving up other options. This concept is known as opportunity cost, and it is essential for understanding how people, companies, and governments make decisions about how to use their scarce resources. The nature of choice. In everyday life, we are constantly making decisions about how to spend our time, money, and energy. Every time we make a decision, we are choosing between different alternatives. For example, if you decide to go to the cinema instead of working overtime, you are making a choice. By choosing to go to the cinema, the opportunity cost is the opportunity to earn the money you would have earned if you had worked. In economics, choice decisions are crucial because they force us to weigh up the benefits and costs of each available option. These decisions are fundamental to economic activities at all levels, from individual decisions to government policies. The concept of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost refers to what is lost when choosing one alternative over another. It is not only the monetary cost of a decision, but also the value of the best alternative sacrificed. This concept is important because it helps individuals and organizations to more effectively evaluate the consequences of their decisions. For example, if you decide to study at university instead of starting work straight away, the opportunity cost is not only the money you would have earned, but also the work experience and opportunities you would have had if you had chosen to work. When making economic decisions, it is essential to consider both the direct benefits of the chosen option and the value of the discarded alternatives. The opportunity cost in everyday life. In everyday life, we constantly face decisions involving opportunity costs. Some of the most common decisions are consumer choice. If you decide to buy a new computer instead of saving that money for vacation, the opportunity cost is the vacation experience you could have enjoyed. Time choice. If you choose to spend an afternoon relaxing at home instead of working on a side project, the opportunity cost could be the extra money you could have earned. Work choice. If you choose to take a job in a different city, the opportunity cost is the life you leave behind, the personal relationships, and the opportunities in the previous city. The opportunity cost in the business world. Companies also make decisions based on opportunity cost. For example, if a company decides to invest in a new product line, the opportunity cost could be the return it would have obtained if it had invested in an expansion of its current line or in an international market. Companies, like individuals, must evaluate the best available alternatives in order to make informed decisions that maximize their benefits. Businessmen and managers must consider not only the direct financial costs of their decisions, but also what they could be losing if they do not take advantage of other opportunities. This is a critical factor in strategic decision-making at the business level. The opportunity cost in the public sector. Governments also face opportunity costs when making decisions about how to spend public resources. For example, if a government decides to spend more on defense, the opportunity cost could be less investment in health or education. Each resource allocation decision involves giving up other options. In the public sector, opportunity cost must be taken into account when formulating public policy. Those in power must weigh up the social and economic benefits of each investment and the possible sacrifices involved in choosing one option over another. This is particularly important in countries with limited resources, where priorities must be carefully evaluated. The Production Possibilities Frontier, PPF. A useful tool for visualizing opportunity cost is the Production Possibility Frontier, PPF, which shows the different combinations of goods and services that an economy can produce given resource constraints. The PPF illustrates how, when a decision is made to increase the production of one good, the production of another good must be reduced due to resource scarcity. Example of PPP. Imagine that a country has limited resources and can choose between producing more food or more technology. If it decides to produce more food, the opportunity cost is the smaller amount of technology that it could produce. PPP shows that you can't have everything, and every choice comes with a sacrifice. Opportunity cost and rational decision-making. In a market economy, rational decisions are those that maximize profit or value obtained. Individuals, companies, and governments make decisions based on available information, cost-benefit analysis, and the evaluation of opportunity costs. While not all decisions can be completely rational due to uncertainty and limited information, the concept of opportunity cost is still fundamental to making informed decisions. Rational decisions always involve a calculation of what is gained and what is lost by making a certain choice. This approach is not only useful for individuals and businesses, but also for government policies, which must consider the opportunity cost of public policies in terms of their social and economic impact. Applications of opportunity cost in economics. Opportunity cost applies to several aspects of the economy, such as investment in human capital. If a person decides to invest time and money in obtaining a university degree, the opportunity cost includes the income they would have earned if they had started working immediately after high school. Savings and consumption. If you decide to save part of your salary instead of spending all the money, the opportunity cost is the immediate consumption you have given up in exchange for the future benefits of saving. Economic policies. Governments must decide how to allocate limited resources among different social needs. For example, if a government chooses to invest more in infrastructure, the opportunity cost may be less investment in education or health. 4. Conclusion. Opportunity cost is one of the most important and fundamental concepts in economics. It is a constant reminder that every economic decision involves giving up other alternatives. By evaluating opportunity cost, individuals, businesses, and governments can make more informed and efficient decisions about how to use their limited resources. In the next chapter, we will take a closer look at economic agents and their behavior, analyzing how the decisions of consumers, producers, governments, and other actors affect the economy as a whole. 4. Economic agents and their behavior. The economy is the result of interactions between different economic agents, which are the individuals and institutions that make decisions about the allocation of resources in an economy. These agents, through their decisions, influence the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Understanding the behavior of each of these actors is essential to understanding how the economy as a whole works. Who are the economic agents? The main economic agents are 1. Consumers. These are the people who demand goods and services to satisfy their needs and desires. Consumers make decisions about what to buy, how much to buy, and when to buy it, based on their preferences, income, and market prices. 2. Companies. These are the organizations that produce goods and services to satisfy the needs of consumers. Companies make decisions about what to produce, how to produce it, and at what price to sell it. These decisions are influenced by production costs, market competition, and consumer demand. 3. The government. The government is another key player in the economy. Its functions include regulating markets, providing public goods such as education, health, and infrastructure, and redistributing wealth through fiscal policies. The government also plays an important role in economic stabilization through monetary and fiscal policies. 4. The external sector. This refers to economic agents outside the national economy, such as other countries, international companies, financial organizations, and global markets. International interactions affect trade, investments, capital flows, and competitiveness. Consumer behavior. Consumer behavior is a central area in economics and refers to how people make decisions about the consumption of goods and services. Consumers seek to maximize their satisfaction or utility given a restriction of resources, such as money and time. Preferences and choices. Consumers have preferences that reflect what they value most in the goods and services they consume. These preferences are influenced by factors such as personal taste, culture, education, and social influences. Consumers are not necessarily rational in their choices, as their decisions can be influenced by emotional and psychological factors, or even the behavior of others. Budget constraint. Budget constraint is the limit to consumer spending, which is determined by their disposable income and the prices of goods and services. Given this limit, consumers must make decisions about how to allocate their money among different goods and services to maximize their well-being. Economic theory analyzes how consumers optimize their choices based on the relationship between prices and their preferences, which gives rise to demand curves. Law of diminishing marginal utility. Marginal utility is the additional satisfaction a person obtains from consuming an extra unit of a good. The law of diminishing marginal utility holds that, as a person consumes more of a good, the additional satisfaction obtained from consuming one more unit decreases. This principle explains why consumers tend to diversify their consumption and not spend their entire budget on a single good. Producer behavior. Companies are the economic agents responsible for the production of goods and services. To produce, companies use factors of production such as labor, capital, and natural resources. The behavior of companies is geared towards maximizing their profits, which means producing at the lowest possible cost and selling at the highest possible price. Production decisions and costs. Companies face decisions about how to organize production, which products to make, and how to improve efficiency. Production costs are a key factor in these decisions. Fixed costs, such as facility rent, do not change with the level of production, while variable costs, such as materials and labor, do. Companies must optimize their marginal costs, the additional cost of producing one more unit, and marginal revenue, the additional revenue generated by the sale of one more unit, in order to maximize their profits. The law of diminishing marginal return states that when adding more units of a production factor, for example, more workers, without increasing other factors such as capital, the additional production generated by each unit of input will be less and less. Competition and monopoly. Companies must also take into account the competition and market structures in which they operate. There are different types of markets, from perfect competition, where there are many producers and consumers and no one has the power to influence prices, to monopoly, where a single company controls the entire market. Companies must adapt to the conditions of the market in which they operate in order to set prices and maximize their profitability. The behavior of the government. The government has a crucial role in the economy, as it establishes the rules of the game and provides public goods that cannot be efficiently produced by the market. The functions of the government include regulation and control. The government regulates markets to ensure that companies compete fairly and that consumers are protected from abusive practices, such as monopolies or exorbitant prices. Labor, environmental, and competition laws are examples of key regulations. Fiscal policy. The government also makes decisions about public spending and tax collection. Fiscal policy involves the use of taxes to finance spending in areas such as education, health, and infrastructure. Fiscal decisions affect the level of economic activity, employment, and the distribution of wealth in society. Monetary policy. Although monetary policy is usually the responsibility of central banks, the government influences the economy through fiscal policies and decisions related to money and interest rates. The behavior of the external sector. In the globalized economy, the behavior of the external sector, made up of other countries and international markets, profoundly affects national economies. International trade relations, foreign investment, and capital flows have a major impact on a country's economic well-being. International trade. International trade allows countries to specialize in the production of goods and services that they produce more efficiently, which increases global welfare. However, trade policies, such as tariffs, subsidies, and international trade agreements, play an important role in the way countries interact with each other. Capital flows and globalization. The flow of capital, money, and financial assets between countries is also crucial. Direct foreign investment and currency markets affect national economies, as well as the political and economic decisions that are made at a global level. 5. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have analyzed the main economic agents: consumers, businesses, the government, and the external sector. Each of these actors makes decisions that affect the economy as a whole. From individual consumption and production decisions to the public policies that regulate markets, each action influences social and economic well-being. Understanding the behavior of these agents is essential to understanding how economies work and how economic decisions are made. In the next chapter, we will explore the goods market and the different structures of competition, such as perfect competition and monopoly, to better understand how economic agents interact in markets. 5. Economic systems: free market, centralized, and mixed. In this chapter, we will explore the different types of economic systems that exist to organize the production and distribution of goods and services in a society. An economic system is the set of institutions, rules, and policies that determine how economic decisions are made and how resources are managed within an economy. There are three main types of economic system that differ in terms of the degree of state intervention, the ownership of resources, and the way in which goods and services are allocated: free market, centralized system, and mixed system. Throughout this chapter, we will explain each of these systems, their characteristics, advantages, and disadvantages, and how they are applied in the real world. The free market, capitalism. The free market or capitalist system is a type of economic system in which the production and distribution of goods and services are managed by the market, that is, by the interactions between consumers and companies. In a free market, the government plays a minimal role in the economy, and market forces, mainly supply and demand, determine the prices, quantities, and types of goods and services produced. Characteristics of the free market. 1. Private property. In a free market system, individuals and private companies are the owners of productive resources such as land, factories, machinery, and human capital. Private property is one of the fundamental principles of capitalism, as it allows owners to make a profit from their investments and efforts. 2. Competition. Competition between companies is a central element in free markets. Companies compete with each other to attract consumers, which forces them to innovate, improve product quality, and reduce prices. 3. Market-determined prices. In a capitalist system, the prices of goods and services are determined by supply and demand. If the demand for a good increases, its price also tends to rise, incentivizing companies to produce more. If supply exceeds demand, prices tend to fall, which can discourage production. 4. Freedom of choice. Consumers are free to choose which goods and services they wish to buy, while companies can produce what they consider most profitable according to market preferences. This encourages efficiency and innovation, as companies must adapt to the changing needs of consumers. Advantages of the free market. Efficiency. The free market encourages an efficient allocation of resources, as companies and consumers make decisions based on mutual benefit and competitiveness. Innovation. Constant competition and the search for profitability encourage technological innovation and the continuous improvement of products and services. Economic freedom. Individuals have the freedom to make their own economic decisions, which promotes entrepreneurship and economic growth. Disadvantages of the free market. Inequality. The capitalist system tends to generate economic inequalities, as people with more resources have greater opportunities to invest and generate wealth, while others may be excluded from access to basic goods and services. Economic cycles. Free markets can be prone to economic crises and unemployment due to cyclical fluctuations in the economy. A lack of regulation can lead to situations of overproduction or financial bubbles that end in crisis. Exploitation. Companies, in their quest for profit, can exploit workers or damage the environment if they are not properly regulated. The centralized system. Socialism. The centralized system, or socialism, is a type of economic system in which the government has total or almost total control over the production, distribution, and allocation of resources. Instead of depending on market forces, the government decides which goods and services will be produced, how they will be produced, and how they will be distributed. Characteristics of the centralized system. 1. State ownership. In socialism, productive resources and companies are owned by the state. The government is responsible for administering and distributing goods and services, with the aim of guaranteeing that the basic needs of the population are met. 2. Centralized planning. The economy is planned by the government. This means that the state establishes long-term economic objectives and organizes the production and distribution of goods and services according to a centralized plan. The government allocates resources according to the priorities it considers necessary for the general welfare. 3. Price control. In a centralized system, the government can also set the prices of goods and services in order to avoid speculation or inflation. The aim is to ensure that products are accessible to the entire population, regardless of their income level. Advantages of the centralized system. Social equality. Socialism seeks to eliminate economic inequalities through the redistribution of wealth. The government can guarantee that all citizens have access to basic goods and services, such as health, education, and housing. Stability. Being under state control, the centralized system can avoid the ups and downs typical of free markets and work to reduce unemployment and inflation. Social welfare. The main objective of socialism is to ensure the welfare of all citizens, not just the richest or most powerful. This can involve policies such as universal access to healthcare, free education, and a robust pension system. Disadvantages of the centralized system. Inefficiency. A lack of competition and direct government intervention in the economy can lead to inefficiencies in the allocation of resources. Centralized planning can be unable to adapt quickly to changes in consumer preferences or market conditions. Lack of incentives. In the absence of a competitive system, state-owned enterprises may lack incentives to innovate or improve product quality, which can result in lower quality products and lower productivity. Bureaucracy. Centralized government control can lead to cumbersome and slow bureaucracy, making it difficult to make quick and efficient decisions. The mixed system. A balance between market and state. The mixed system is a combination of the free market and centralized systems. In this system, some sectors of the economy are under market control, while others are managed or regulated by the government. The mixed system attempts to combine the benefits of both approaches, market efficiency and innovation, with the social justice and economic security provided by state intervention. Characteristics of the mixed system. 1. Mixed ownership. In a mixed system, there are both private and state-owned companies. Some key sectors, such as health, education, public transport, and energy, may be managed by the government, while others, such as technology or commerce, are dominated by private companies. 2. State regulation. Although many economic decisions are left to the market, the government regulates certain areas of the economy, such as prices, labor, the environment, and competition, to prevent abuses and promote general welfare. 3. Redistribution of wealth. The mixed system maintains redistribution policies through progressive taxation and social welfare programs to reduce inequalities and ensure that all citizens have access to basic services. Advantages of the mixed system. Balance between efficiency and equity. The mixed system seeks to combine market efficiency with the social equity that the government can offer. This allows for economic growth without neglecting social justice. Flexibility. A mixed system can adapt better to change, since both the market and the government play important roles in the economy. Disadvantages of the mixed system. Complexity. The coexistence of private and state-owned companies can generate conflicts of interest and difficulties in regulating both sectors effectively. Possible government inefficiency. Although the government controls key areas of the economy, state intervention can generate bureaucracy and discourage innovation in some sectors. 6. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have explored the three main types of economic systems: free market, centralized, and mixed. Each has its advantages and disadvantages, and the choice of an economic system depends on the social, economic, and political objectives of each society. In today's world, many countries adopt mixed systems, where a balance is sought between market freedom and government intervention to promote the common good. In the next chapter, we will explore consumer behavior and how their decisions impact the economy in terms of supply. 6. Positive and normative economics, the debate. In this chapter, We're going to look in more depth at the two main branches of economics that allow for a deeper analysis and discussion of how the economy works and how it should be organized: positive economics and normative economics. Both disciplines play a crucial role in the way economists analyze and address economic problems, but their approaches are very different. Positive economics. What is it, and what does it study? Positive economics is concerned with describing and explaining economic phenomena as they are, without making value judgments. Its objective is to explain the cause and effect relationships that occur in the economy, based on facts, observations, and data. In simple terms, positive economics answers the question, what happens? Or, how do things work? For example, if we analyze how the increase in gasoline prices affects the demand for cars, we would be in the field of positive economics. Positive economists examine the behavior of consumers and businesses based on empirical evidence and statistics. They focus on establishing general laws that explain observable economic patterns. Characteristics of positive economics. Objectivity. Positive economics focuses on verifiable facts and figures. It does not make judgments about whether a policy or decision is good or bad, but simply analyzes how things work in practice. Causes and effects. The main objective is to find causal relationships. For example, the relationship between an increase in the minimum wage and the level of employment. It is about identifying how certain factors affect others, without involving any opinion on whether those effects are desirable or not. Data-based analysis. Positive economists collect data, use mathematical models and statistical analysis to reach verifiable conclusions about how the economy works. Example of positive economics. A classic example of positive economics is the analysis of the impact of a change in taxes on consumer behavior. If the government increases taxes on luxury goods, a positive economist will study how this increase affects the demand for these goods, using data and models to make predictions. Normative economics. What is it, and what does it study? Unlike positive economics, normative economics does not focus on explaining what happens in the economy, but on deciding what should happen. It deals with value judgments and is based on opinions about what is fair or desirable for society. Normative economics addresses questions such as, what should be done? Or, how should the economy be organized? For example, normative economics examines issues such as the distribution of wealth, social equity, economic justice, and other public policies. A normative economist might argue that it is morally preferable for governments to intervene in the economy to reduce income inequality, although there is no universal consensus on this issue. Characteristics of normative economics. Ethical and political assessment. Normative economics is deeply influenced by social and political values. It is more related to opinions about what is desirable, fair, or morally correct, rather than being purely objective. Public policy proposals. Normative economists often propose changes in economic policies. For example, they may suggest the implementation of income redistribution policies or advocate for the universalization of education and public health. Subjective perspective. Unlike positive economics, normative economics is open to debate, as different people have different opinions about what is good or fair. These opinions can be influenced by political beliefs, ideologies, or cultural values. Example of normative economics. An example of normative economics is the debate about the minimum wage. A normative economist might argue that it is morally right to set a minimum wage to ensure that workers earn enough to cover their basic needs. This judgment is based on the idea of social justice, not on empirical data demonstrating the real impact of the minimum wage on the economy. The key differences between positive and normative economics. The main difference between positive economics and normative economics lies in their objectives and approaches. 1. Focus on facts versus opinions. Positive economics is based on facts and objective analysis of how the economy works, while normative economics focuses on what should be done, based on opinions and value judgments. 2. Explain versus prescribe. Positive economists explain how economic phenomena occur, while normative economists prescribe what should be done, based on what they consider desirable or fair. 3. Objectivity versus subjectivity. Positive economics is more objective, as it is based on verifiable data, while normative economics is influenced by personal beliefs and values. 4. Policy versus theory. Positive economics focuses more on the theory and description of the economy, while normative economics tends to be more policy-oriented. How are positive and normative economics related? Although positive and normative economics are different, they are closely interrelated. Positive economics provides the facts and data necessary to make a sound analysis of the economy, while normative economics uses that data to make judgments about what should be done. For example, if positive economics shows that increasing taxes on the rich reduces income inequality, normative economists might argue that this is a desirable public policy from a social justice perspective. Normative economists can use the evidence provided by positive economists to support their proposals. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have distinguished between two key approaches in economic analysis: positive economics, which is concerned with describing and explaining economic reality as it is, and normative economics, which focuses on proposing what should be done to improve social welfare. Both approaches are necessary to understand how the economy works and how economic decisions should be made. Positive economics helps us understand the effects of economic policies and decisions, while normative economics provides us with the tools to decide which policies and decisions are the fairest and most effective. In the next chapter, we will explore the fundamental concepts of microeconomics and how the decisions of consumers and companies affect markets. 7. Microeconomics and macroeconomics, basic concepts. In this chapter, we will explore two fundamental areas of economics: microeconomics and macroeconomics. Although both focus on the study of economic decisions, each one deals with different aspects of the economy, with a different focus on the actors involved and the variables they analyze. Microeconomics, the study of individual decisions. Microeconomics is the branch of economics that studies the behavior of individuals, households, and companies in making economic decisions, as well as their interaction in markets. In other words, microeconomics focuses on decisions at the individual level and how these affect the supply and demand of goods and services. Main characteristics of microeconomics. 1. Consumer behavior. Microeconomics studies how consumers make decisions about which products to buy, in what quantity and at what price, based on their preferences, income, and market prices. 2. Producer behavior. It focuses on how companies decide which products to produce, how to produce them, and at what price to sell them, with the aim of maximizing their profits. 3. Supply and demand. The interaction between the supply of goods and services and consumer demand determines the prices and the quantity of products exchanged in the market. Microeconomics analyzes how changes in supply and demand affect market equilibrium. 4. Competition and markets. Microeconomics also studies how different types of markets, such as perfect competition, monopoly, and monopolistic competition, affect prices and production. Examples of microeconomics. A consumer decides how much to spend on food and how much to save based on their income and the prices of the products. A company decides whether to produce more units of a good based on the cost of production and the price at which it can sell those units. A market where several sellers compete to offer the same product to buyers, which influences the price and quality of the product. Importance of microeconomics. Microeconomics helps us understand the fundamentals of decision-making at the personal and business level. These decisions impact the price and quantity of goods and services available in markets, which, in turn, affects the efficient allocation of resources in the economy. Macroeconomics, the study of the economy as a whole. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, studies large-scale economic phenomena, such as the overall performance of the economy, employment, inflation, economic growth, and public policies that affect the entire economy. Unlike microeconomics, which focuses on individual actors, macroeconomics is concerned with the aggregate behavior of the economy. Key features of macroeconomics. 1. Gross domestic product, GDP. GDP is one of the key indicators in macroeconomics. It represents the total value of all goods and services produced in a country in a given period. GDP analysis helps us measure economic growth and compare the economic performance of different countries. 2. Unemployment. Macroeconomics studies unemployment levels in an economy and the policies to reduce it. A high level of unemployment can indicate an economic recession, while a low level can reflect a healthy economy. 3. Inflation. Inflation is the generalized increase in the prices of goods and services in the economy. Macroeconomics analyzes the causes of inflation, its effects on purchasing power, and the monetary policies that can control inflation. For fiscal and monetary policy, macroeconomics also studies how the government and central banks influence the economy through fiscal, public spending and taxes, and monetary, control of the money supply and interest rates, policies. 5. Economic growth. Long-term economic growth is one of the main objectives of macroeconomics. It refers to the sustained increase in an economy's production and income over time. Examples of macroeconomics. A government decides to implement a fiscal stimulus package to increase aggregate demand and reduce the unemployment rate during an economic recession. The central bank decides to raise interest rates to control inflation and maintain price stability. A country experiences GDP growth due to an increase in investment in infrastructure and technology, which generates more employment and higher levels of production. Importance of macroeconomics. Macroeconomics provides a global vision of the economy and allows us to understand how decisions at the national level, such as fiscal and monetary policies, affect general economic well-being. In addition, economists use macroeconomic indicators such as GDP, unemployment, and inflation to predict the future of the economy and design policies that improve growth and stability. Differences between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Although microeconomics and macroeconomics share fundamental principles, they differ in the scope and focus of their studies. 1. Scale of analysis. Microeconomics focuses on specific individuals, companies, and markets, while macroeconomics focuses on the performance of the economy as a whole. 2. Areas of study. Microeconomics studies the behavior of consumers and producers, as well as supply and demand in markets. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, deals with global indicators such as GDP, unemployment, inflation, and government policies. 3. Interaction. Although they are separate fields, microeconomics and macroeconomics are interrelated. For example, consumer behavior, micro, influences the level of aggregate demand, which can affect economic growth, macro. Macroeconomic policies, such as controlling inflation, also affect micro-level decisions, such as prices and wages. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have explored the two fundamental branches of economics, microeconomics and macroeconomics. Each of these areas has a unique and complementary approach to understanding how the economy works, from individual decisions to the global behavior of markets and the economy as a whole. Both are essential for designing efficient public policies and for understanding the dynamics that affect the well-being of individuals and societies. In the next chapter, we will take a closer look at consumer behavior, how their preferences and decisions influence the economy, and how demand is built in markets. 8. Economic analysis, theories and models. In this chapter, we will look at economic analysis, which is the central tool used by economists to study how economies work, how decisions are made, and how different economic agents interact. Economic analysis is based on the use of theories and models that simplify reality and allow us to understand complex economic processes. These models provide us with a way of visualizing economic relationships and predicting the effects of different decisions and policies. Economic theories. Explaining the world. Economic theories are abstract explanations of how economic phenomena work. These theories are based on the observation of economic facts, but seek to identify patterns and regularities that can be applied to different contexts. Economic theories are used to interpret the behavior of individuals, businesses, and governments, as well as to predict the outcomes of their decisions. Supply and demand theory. One of the most fundamental theories in economics is the theory of supply and demand, which explains how the prices and quantities of goods and services are determined in markets. According to this theory, the price of a good or service adjusts until supply, the quantity of products that producers are willing to sell, equals demand, the quantity of products that consumers are willing to buy. Law of demand. When the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded by consumers tends to decrease, and vice versa, all other things being equal. Law of supply. When the price of a good increases, the quantity offered by producers tends to increase, and vice versa. The equilibrium point is the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, and it is at this point that the price and quantity of transactions in a competitive market are established. Consumer behavior theory. Another key theory is consumer behavior theory, which focuses on how consumers make decisions about which goods and services to buy, given their preferences and income restrictions. Consumers seek to maximize their utility, satisfaction, and make decisions based on the law of diminishing marginal utility, which states that as a person consumes more units of a good, the additional satisfaction obtained from each additional unit decreases. Economic models. Representing reality. An economic model is a simplified representation of a real economic phenomenon that uses diagrams, graphs, and mathematical formulas to describe relationships and effects between variables. The models do not attempt to reflect all aspects of reality, but focus on the most important elements of an economic problem. Supply and demand models. The basic supply and demand model is one of the most widely used in economics. This model uses a graph with price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. The demand and supply curves show how the quantity demanded or supplied changes in relation to the price. The point where these two curves intersect represents the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Supply and demand models are used to analyze the effects of changes in market conditions, such as an increase in consumer income, an improvement in production technology, or a change in government policies, such as the imposition of taxes or subsidies. Economic growth models. Economic growth models are used to explain how economies grow over time and what factors affect this growth. A classic model is the Solow growth model, which analyzes the impact of capital, labor, and technology on a country's gross domestic product, GDP. In this model, an increase in capital, for example, in infrastructure or technology, can lead to sustained growth in the economy, while an increase in the labor force or in technology can also be key to long-term economic development. International trade models. International trade models explain how and why countries trade with each other. One of the best-known models is David Ricardo's comparative advantage model, which suggests that countries should specialize in the production of goods in which they have a comparative advantage, that is, those goods that they can produce more efficiently than other countries, and then exchange those goods with other countries. International trade allows countries to access products that they cannot produce efficiently by themselves, generating mutual benefits through specialization and the division of labor. The role of economic models in politics. Economic models are essential tools for policymakers. Governments and central banks use models to predict the effects of their decisions on the economy and to design policies that promote economic growth, stability, and social justice. Monetary and fiscal policy. For example, a central bank can use an economic model to predict how a change in interest rates will affect inflation and economic growth. A government can also use models to estimate the effects of an expansionary fiscal policy, such as increased public spending or tax cuts, on employment levels and the fiscal deficit. Economic models help policymakers evaluate the consequences of different policies and design strategies to achieve desired objectives. Limitations of economic models. Despite being useful tools, economic models have limitations. Models simplify reality and are often based on assumptions that may not hold true in practice. For example, many models assume that consumers and businesses are rational and always make optimal decisions, but human irrationality and emotional factors can influence economic decisions. Furthermore, economic models cannot predict human behavior in situations of uncertainty, and external shocks, such as a global financial crisis or a pandemic, can drastically alter predicted outcomes. Conclusion. Economic analysis through theories and models is a crucial tool for understanding how the economy works and for making informed decisions about economic policies. Economic theories offer explanations of how different economic actors make decisions, while models allow us to visualize and predict the effects of those decisions. Although economic models are simplifications of reality, they remain fundamental for analyzing economic phenomena and for helping decision-makers formulate policies that promote social welfare and economic development. In the next chapter, we will explore consumer behavior and how consumer decisions influence the demand for goods and services, as well as the impact of preferences and budget constraints on economic choices. 9. The consumer, preferences, and purchasing decisions. Consumer behavior is fundamental to understanding how markets work and how resources are distributed in an economy. Consumers, in their quest to satisfy their needs and desires, make decisions about which goods and services to buy, how much to spend, and how to distribute their money among different options. These decisions, which may seem simple at the individual level, have a profound impact on the economy as a whole. In this chapter, we will explore how consumers make purchasing decisions, how they are influenced by their preferences and budgetary restrictions, and how the economic laws of supply and demand determine the interaction between consumers and producers. Consumer preferences. Consumer preferences refer to the personal tastes, desires, and choices that influence purchasing decisions. Each consumer has an idea of what they would like to consume, and these preferences are fundamental to understanding the demand for goods and services. What are preferences? In simple terms, preferences are an individual's tastes and desires in relation to goods and services. People are not indifferent between one good and another. They tend to prefer certain products over others due to factors such as personal taste, culture, advertising, and social influences. For example, a consumer might prefer a fruit-based soft drink to a soda because of their personal tastes, their health awareness, or recommendations from friends or family. Preferences vary widely among different people and groups, which means that what is valuable to one consumer may not be to another. The consumer preference curve. In microeconomics, economists use indifference curves to represent consumer preferences. An indifference curve shows all the combinations of goods that a consumer considers equally satisfactory. Any point along the curve represents a combination of goods that offers the same level of utility or satisfaction. Utility. Utility refers to the satisfaction or well-being that a consumer obtains from consuming a good or service. Economists assume that consumers try to maximize their utility when making purchasing decisions. Budget constraints. Although consumers have unlimited desires and preferences, their purchasing decisions are restricted by their budget. A consumer's limited budget sets a limit on the amount of goods and services they can buy. This concept is fundamental to understanding how consumer decisions are made. The budget constraint. Budget constraint is the maximum quantity of goods and services that a consumer can buy, given their income restrictions and the prices of the products. In other words, given a limited income, consumers must make decisions about which goods to purchase, prioritizing those they consider most valuable and giving up others. Budget constraint is represented graphically by a budget line, which shows all the combinations of goods that a consumer can purchase with their disposable income. Consumers face a choice about how to allocate their money between different goods, and the slope of the budget line depends on the relative prices of the goods. Income. The higher a consumer's income, the greater the quantity of goods and services they can buy, thus increasing the available options. Prices. The prices of goods also play a crucial role in budgetary restrictions. If the price of a good increases, the quantity that the consumer can buy is reduced, affecting their choice. The law of diminishing marginal utility. One of the key concepts in consumer behavior theory is the law of diminishing marginal utility. This law states that, as a person consumes more units of a good, the marginal utility, additional satisfaction, obtained from each additional unit decreases. Example of diminishing marginal utility. Imagine that a consumer is hungry and decides to eat a slice of pizza. The first slice gives him great satisfaction, high marginal utility. However, as he continues to eat more slices, the marginal utility of each additional slice decreases. The second slice is more satisfying than the third, and the fourth may not be desired at all if he has already satisfied his hunger. The law of diminishing marginal utility explains why consumers do not spend all their money on a single good, but rather distribute their spending among several goods to maximize total satisfaction. Purchasing behavior. Utility maximization. Consumers seek to maximize their total utility, which means that they will try to allocate their budget in such a way as to obtain the highest possible level of satisfaction. To do this, they compare the marginal utilities of the different goods they could buy and choose those that provide the greatest utility for each unit of money spent. Utility maximization rule. The basic rule of utility maximization states that a consumer should allocate their budget in such a way that the marginal utility per dollar spent on a good is the same for all goods. In other words, the consumer balances spending between goods until the marginal utility per unit of price is the same for all the products they consume. This rule implies that consumers will make rational decisions to maximize their well-being within the limitations of their budget. Demand: how preferences and budget constraints determine purchases. The demand for a good or service is the quantity of that good that consumers are willing to purchase at different price levels, other factors such as income and preferences remaining constant. The demand curve shows how the quantity demanded varies as the price of a good changes. Law of demand. The law of demand states that, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal, as the price of a good decreases, the quantity demanded of that good increases, and vice versa. This inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded is reflected in the negative slope of the demand curve. Factors affecting demand. There are several factors besides price that can affect the demand for a good. Consumer income. When a consumer's income increases, they can generally buy more goods and services, which increases the demand for those products. Preferences and tastes. Changes in consumer preferences and tastes can cause the demand for a good to increase or decrease. Prices of related goods. The price of substitute goods, products that can replace another, or complementary goods, products that are consumed together, also affects demand. Expectations. Expectations about future changes in the price or availability of goods can influence purchasing decisions. Conclusion. Consumer behavior is an essential component in understanding how markets work. Purchasing decisions are influenced by personal preferences, budgetary restrictions, and the marginal utility obtained from consuming each good. Consumers make rational decisions to maximize their total utility within the limitations of their income. In the next chapter, we will explore the behavior of producers and how companies make decisions about the production, cost, and supply of goods and services, analyzing how these decisions affect the market and economic well-being. 10. The producer, production, and cost decisions. In this chapter, we delve into producer behavior, which is fundamental to understanding how goods and services are created in an economy. Unlike the consumer, whose main function is to consume, the producer is dedicated to the production of goods and services, making key decisions about what to produce, how to produce it, and how much to produce. Analyzing companies' production decisions allows us to better understand how resources are organized in the economy and how prices are set in markets. The role of the producer in the economy. The producer is any person or entity that uses the factors of production, labor, capital, land, and technology to generate goods and services that satisfy the needs of consumers. Producers seek to maximize their profits, that is, the difference between their income, money they receive for selling products, and their costs, money they must pay to produce those products. The producer's decisions affect both the prices and the quantity of goods and services available in the market, which, in turn, influences the well-being of the economy as a whole. Production decisions. Producers make several key production-related decisions, such as 1. What to produce. Determining which goods or services to produce depends on consumer preferences, market prices, and production costs. Producers focus on producing the goods that maximize their profitability. 2. How to produce. Producers must choose the most efficient production methods. This includes deciding which technologies to use, which combination of production factors to employ, and how to organize the workforce. 3. How much to produce. Producers must also decide how many units of a good or service to produce. This decision is influenced by market demand, production costs, and available production capacity. Factors of production. Factors of production are the inputs used in the creation of goods and services. There are 4 key factors. 1. Land. This refers to all the natural resources used in production, such as arable land, minerals, water, and energy resources. 2. Labor. This refers to the human effort used in production, which includes both physical and intellectual work. 3. Capital. This is the money, machines, equipment, facilities, and tools used to produce goods and services. 4. Technology. This includes the knowledge, processes, and methods that improve production efficiency and productivity. Producers must make decisions about how to allocate these factors efficiently in order to maximize their results. Production costs. The analysis of production costs is essential to understand the behavior of producers. Costs are the expenses incurred by a producer to manufacture goods and services and are divided into several categories. Fixed and variable costs. Fixed costs. These are costs that do not change with the level of production, such as factory rent, fixed salaries, and administration costs. These costs must be paid even if nothing is produced. Variable costs. These are the costs that change depending on the level of production, such as materials, the wages of temporary workers, or energy costs. As production increases, so do these costs. Total, average, and marginal costs. Total costs. The sum of all fixed and variable production costs. Total costs determine how much it costs the producer to manufacture a certain quantity of goods. Average cost. Total cost divided by the quantity of goods produced. Average cost is used to analyze production efficiency. If the average cost is high, it means that the producer is not using resources efficiently. Marginal cost. This is the additional cost of producing one more unit of a good. Marginal cost is crucial for production decisions, as producers make decisions about how much to produce based on how the marginal cost compares to the price at which they can sell the good. Production cost curves. The study of production costs is represented graphically by several curves that help economists and entrepreneurs make informed decisions. Total cost curve shows how total costs vary as production increases. Average cost curve shows how the average cost of production changes with the level of production. At first, the average cost tends to decrease as the number of units produced increases, but eventually it increases when resources become less efficient. Marginal cost curve represents how the cost of producing an additional unit varies as production increases. The marginal cost curve is usually upward sloping due to diminishing returns. Marginal returns and the law of diminishing returns. The law of diminishing returns is a key economic principle which states that when adding more units of a production factor, such as workers or machinery, without increasing other factors such as technology or infrastructure, the additional production generated by each additional unit will be less and less. Example of the law of diminishing returns. Imagine a factory that produces shirts. If the factory has one machine and one worker, it can produce a certain number of shirts. If a second worker is added, production will increase, but not proportionally. If more workers are added without increasing the number of machines, each additional worker will contribute less to total production. This is an example of diminishing marginal returns, as each additional worker has less equipment available to work with, reducing their productivity. Producer supply. A producer's supply behavior describes how the producer decides how many goods or services to offer on the market at different prices. In general, as the price of a good increases, producers have an incentive to produce more, as higher prices increase profits. This relationship between price and quantity supplied is reflected in the supply curve. Law of supply. The law of supply states that, ceteris paribus, as the price of a good increases, the quantity supplied by producers tends to increase, and vice versa. This is because producers are motivated by the opportunity to make higher profits by selling at higher prices. Market equilibrium. Market equilibrium is reached when the quantity demanded of a good by consumers is equal to the quantity supplied by producers. At this point, the price is the equilibrium price, and the market is in balance. Producers adjust the quantity of goods produced in response to prices, seeking to maximize their profits, while consumers adjust their demand according to prices and their preferences. Conclusion. Producer behavior is crucial to understanding how markets work and how the prices and quantities of goods and services are determined. Producers make key decisions about what, how, and how much to produce, based on the interaction between production costs, market prices, and consumer demand. In addition, production decisions are influenced by marginal returns and the law of diminishing returns, which determine production efficiency. In the next chapter, we will explore the goods market and analyze market structures such as perfect competition and monopoly to understand how different types of markets affect prices, production, and economic efficiency. 11. Goods market, perfect competition, and monopoly. In this chapter, we will explore two fundamental market structures that affect the dynamics of prices, supply and demand, perfect competition and monopoly. These two structures represent the opposite ends of competition in markets, and understanding them is key to understanding how prices are set and how resources are distributed in an economy. Perfect competition, the ideal model. Perfect competition is an idealized market structure in which there are many companies selling identical products, and no producer has the power to influence the market price. In this model, consumers have perfect information about the products, and companies have no barriers to entering or leaving the market. Characteristics of perfect competition. 1. Many producers and consumers. In a perfectly competitive market, there are a very large number of companies and consumers. No single company or consumer has enough power to influence the price of the good or service. 2. Homogeneous products. The goods and services offered in the market are identical. This means that there is no differentiation between the products of different companies. All products are perceived as equivalent by consumers. 3. Free entry and exit. There are no barriers for companies to enter or leave the market. If a company is making a profit, new companies can enter the market, increasing supply and reducing prices. If companies are losing money, they can leave the market without restrictions. 4. Perfect information. Consumers and producers have complete information about the prices and characteristics of the products. This means that there are no information asymmetries and consumers make fully informed decisions. Behavior in a perfect competition market. In a perfectly competitive market, the market price is determined by supply and demand. No company has the power to set its own price. All companies are price takers, which means that they must accept the price set by the market. The equilibrium price is the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. 1. Short-term economic benefits. Companies can make economic profits if the market price is higher than the average cost of production. However, due to the free entry and exit of companies, these profits will attract new competitors to the market, which will increase supply and reduce the price until companies can only make normal profits, zero economic profits, in the long term. 2. Economic efficiency. Perfect competition is economically efficient because resources are allocated in such a way as to maximize social benefits. Companies produce at the lowest possible cost, and consumers obtain goods at the lowest possible prices. There are no losses of social welfare in this model. Limitations of perfect competition. Although perfect competition is a useful theoretical model for understanding economic efficiency, in practice it is very rare to find markets that meet all the criteria for perfect competition. In reality, most markets have some form of imperfection, whether in information, product differentiation, or barriers to entry. Monopoly. The opposite of perfect competition. A monopoly is a market structure in which a single company controls the entire supply of a good or service. In this type of market, the producer has market power to set the price, as it faces no direct competition. Characteristics of a monopoly. 1. A single producer. In a monopoly, a single company is responsible for the production and sale of a good or service, which means that it controls the entire market supply. 2. Non-homogeneous goods. Unlike in a situation of perfect competition, the products in a monopoly are not identical. The monopolistic company can offer a unique product with no close substitutes, which gives it total control over the market. 3. Barriers to entry. In monopolies, there are significant barriers to the entry of new companies. These barriers can be natural, for example, the presence of high fixed costs, or artificially created by the monopolistic company, such as patents, exclusive control of key resources, or economies of scale. 4. Market power. The monopolist has the ability to set the prices of products and services, as it faces no direct competition. The monopolist can maximize its profits by reducing the quantity produced and increasing the price, which generally results in higher prices for consumers. Behavior in a monopoly. In a monopolistic market, the company maximizes its profits by producing less and selling at higher prices than would be established in a competitive market. The monopolist sets the price according to the demand curve and the marginal cost, choosing the level of production that maximizes its income. 1. Profit maximization. The monopolist maximizes profits when its marginal revenue, the additional revenue generated by the sale of one more unit, is equal to the marginal cost, the additional cost of producing one more unit. At this point, the monopolist adjusts the price to maximize its profitability. 2. Efficiency and welfare. A monopoly, as opposed to perfect competition, is not efficient. The monopolist produces less than would be produced in a competitive market and sells at a higher price, resulting in a loss of social welfare. The quantity of goods produced is less than what consumers would be willing to buy at a lower price, resulting in a loss of consumer surplus. Types of monopoly. Natural monopoly. This occurs when a single company can meet the entire market demand more efficiently than several companies, due to economies of scale. An example of a natural monopoly is public utilities, water, electricity, gas, which are often operated by the government. Legal monopoly. A monopoly that is created by law, such as when a company receives a patent for a product or process, which gives it exclusive rights to produce and sell that product for a certain period of time. De facto monopoly. This occurs when a company becomes a monopolist due to its size, control of resources, or innovation, which allows it to dominate the market without government intervention. Comparison between perfect competition and monopoly. Perfect competition and monopoly represent two opposite ends of the market structure spectrum. In perfect competition, there are many producers and consumers, and the price is determined by market forces, whereas in a monopoly, a single company controls the market and sets the prices. Monopoly tends to result in higher prices and lower production compared to perfect competition, leading to a loss of social welfare. In contrast, perfect competition allows for the efficient allocation of resources and lower prices for consumers. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have explored two of the most important market structures, perfect competition and monopoly. While perfect competition is an idealized model that maximizes economic efficiency, monopoly represents a situation in which a single company controls the market and has the power to set prices, which generally results in higher prices and lower production. However, both perfect competition and monopoly are theoretical models and are rarely found in their pure form in the real world. In the next chapter, we will analyze the markets for factors of production, such as labor and capital, and how labor and financial markets interact to determine income and the distribution of economic well-being. 12. Factor market, labor and capital. In this chapter, we will explore factor markets, which are fundamental to understanding how resources are allocated in an economy. Factors of production, such as labor, capital, land, and information, are used to produce goods and services. In particular, we will focus on labor markets and capital markets, which are essential for the functioning of the economy and the distribution of wealth. The labor market, labor supply, and demand. The labor market is the place where employers, companies, governments, organizations demand labor, and individuals offer their labor in exchange for wages and benefits. The price of labor is the wage, which is determined by supply and demand in the labor market. Labor demand. The demand for labor refers to the amount of labor that companies are willing to hire at different wage levels. Companies demand labor to produce goods and services, and the amount of labor they demand depends on factors such as 1. The marginal productivity of labor. The marginal productivity of labor is the additional value that a worker contributes to the production of goods or services. As wages increase, companies tend to hire more workers if the marginal productivity of labor justifies the cost. 2. The price of goods. Companies are willing to pay more for workers if the products they manufacture are sold at higher prices. An increase in the price of a good can encourage companies to hire more workers to produce more of that good. 3. Technology and capital. The use of technology and capital also influences the demand for labor. An increase in technology can increase worker productivity, which could increase the demand for labor. Labor supply. Labor supply refers to the amount of labor that individuals are willing to offer at different wage levels. Labor supply depends on several factors, such as 1. Wages. The higher the wage, the more people will be willing to work. This is because work is perceived as a sacrifice of time and effort, so individuals require a higher salary as compensation. 2. Preferences and restrictions. People's decisions about whether or not to work also depend on their personal preferences, such as the balance between work and leisure, as well as family or social restrictions that may influence their willingness to work. 3. Demographic factors. Age, gender, educational level, and work experience all influence the amount of work available in the market. Furthermore, changes in the active population affect the labor supply, as an increase in the population generally implies an increase in the labor supply. Balance in the labor market. The equilibrium wage is the wage at which the quantity of labor offered is equal to the quantity of labor demanded. At this point, there is neither excess supply, involuntary unemployment, nor a shortage of workers. If the wage is higher than the equilibrium wage, there will be an excess supply of labor, unemployment. If it is lower, there will be a shortage of workers to fill the available positions. The capital market, money for production. The capital market is where companies, governments, and other economic actors obtain the funds necessary to finance production and investment. Capital includes financial resources such as money, shares, bonds, and loans. Companies and governments ask investors and lenders for money to finance the construction of factories, infrastructure, and other productive projects. Demand for capital. The demand for capital comes from companies that need financial resources to invest in infrastructure, technology, and expansion. Companies demand capital when the rate of return on their investment is higher than the cost of funds, the interest rate. Companies compare the cost of capital, the interest rate they have to pay, with the expected return on their investments. If the rate of return is high and exceeds the cost of funds, companies will be willing to borrow and contract more capital. Supply of capital. The supply of capital comes from savers and investors who are looking for a return on their money. Individuals and financial institutions, such as banks, investment funds, and stock markets, offer capital to companies and governments in exchange for interest or shares. The amount of capital available depends on factors such as 1. Interest rate. Savers are more willing to offer capital when interest rates are high, as they can get a higher return on their money. 2. Economic expectations. If investors believe that the economy is going to grow, they will be more willing to invest in business projects, which will increase the supply of capital. 3. Government policies. Fiscal and monetary policies, such as setting interest rates and issuing public debt, also affect the supply of capital. Governments can encourage investment by reducing taxes or creating favorable conditions for investors. Balance in the capital market. The price of capital is reflected in the interest rate, which is determined by the interaction between the supply of and demand for funds. When the demand for capital is high, for example, due to business expansion, interest rates tend to rise. If the supply of capital is high, for example, due to an increase in savings, interest rates may fall. Interaction between labor and capital markets. The labor and capital markets are closely related. Companies need both workers and capital to produce goods and services. A labor shortage or high cost of capital can negatively affect the production and competitiveness of companies. For example, if the cost of labor is high due to a shortage of workers, companies may decide to invest more in technology and automation capital to reduce their dependence on labor. Similarly, if interest rates are high, companies may find it difficult to access funds for investment, which can limit their capacity for expansion and production. Conclusion. Factor markets are essential for the functioning of the economy, as they determine the allocation of the resources that firms need to produce goods and services. The labor market is based on the supply and demand for labor, which determines wages and employment, while the capital market deals with the funds needed to finance production. Both markets are interrelated and directly affect production and economic welfare. In the next chapter, we will look more closely at market failures and how government interventions, such as taxes, subsidies, and regulations, can correct inefficiencies and improve social welfare. 13. Market failures and their impact. In this chapter, we will explore market failures, situations in which markets do not allocate resources efficiently or fail to maximize social welfare. Although the market system is one of the most efficient ways to allocate resources in many circumstances, there are cases where the market fails and does not produce the desired results. In these cases, it may be necessary for the government to intervene to correct inefficiencies and improve social welfare. What are market failures? Market failures occur when the market fails to allocate resources efficiently, leading to a loss of welfare. In an efficient market, resources are distributed in such a way that the total welfare of society is maximized, but when there are failures, there is a suboptimal allocation of resources. This can result in an unequal distribution of wealth or a production of goods and services below the amount desired by society. Main types of market failure. 1. Monopolies. Monopolies are one of the clearest examples of market failure. In a monopoly, a single company controls the entire supply of a good or service, which allows it to set higher prices and produce less than would be efficient in a competitive market. This leads to a loss of social welfare as consumers end up paying higher prices and receiving fewer products. 2. Externalities. Externalities are the side effects of the production or consumption of goods and services that affect third parties not involved in the transaction. These externalities can be positive or negative. Negative externalities, such as pollution, occur when the production or consumption of a good imposes costs on society that are not reflected in the market price. For example, a factory that pollutes the air when producing goods creates a cost for public health that is not paid by the company. Positive externalities occur when the production or consumption of a good benefits third parties. For example, when a person receives education, it not only improves their life, but also contributes to the well-being of society by being more productive and participative. 3. Public goods. Public goods are those that are non-excludable and non-rivalrous, which means that people cannot be prevented from using them, and one person's use does not reduce availability to others. Examples of public goods include clean air, national defense, street lighting, and education. By their nature, markets cannot provide public goods in efficient quantities, as people can benefit from them without paying, leading to an underproduction of these goods. 4. Imperfect information. Imperfect information occurs when buyers or sellers do not have all the information necessary to make informed decisions. A common example of this is the insurance market, where insurers do not have all the information about customer risks, a problem known as adverse selection. This can lead to companies not offering adequate prices or consumers not making optimal decisions. 5. Inequality in income distribution. In many markets, resources are not distributed equitably, which gives rise to economic inequality. This can be the result of factors such as unequal access to education, ownership of productive resources, or differences in labor productivity. Inequality can be considered a market failure if it is perceived as not reflecting a fair distribution of social welfare. The impact of market failures. Market failures have a direct impact on social welfare. When a market does not produce what society needs efficiently, several consequences can occur. 1. Loss of welfare. When resources are not allocated efficiently, society as a whole loses welfare. For example, in a monopoly, consumers pay higher prices for fewer products than they would have received in a competitive market, which reduces the total welfare of society. 2. Inefficiency in the allocation of resources. Market failures can result in resources not being used efficiently. For example, in the case of pollution, resources are used to produce goods that cause damage to health and the environment, which could have been avoided if the social costs of pollution had been included in the price of the good. 3. Inequity. Market failures can also result in an unequal distribution of goods and services. Economic inequality, for example, can lead to people with fewer resources having limited access to important goods and services, such as education and healthcare, which perpetuates social inequalities. How to correct market failures. Government intervention. Given that markets cannot always correct their own failures, it is often necessary for the government to intervene to improve the efficiency and equity of the economy. There are several ways in which the government can intervene to correct market failures. 1. Regulation. The government can regulate industries to correct monopolies, reduce negative externalities, and improve the information available. For example, governments can impose antitrust laws to prevent excessive market concentration or environmental regulations to reduce pollution. 2. Taxes and subsidies. Governments can use taxes and subsidies to correct externalities. For example, a carbon tax can incentivize companies to reduce their emissions of polluting gases, while subsidies for education can incentivize individuals to invest in their human capital, which benefits society in general. 3. Provision of public goods. The government can intervene directly in the provision of public goods, such as national defense, education, and the health system. Since markets cannot provide these goods efficiently, the government takes an active role in ensuring that all citizens have access to these services. 4. Redistributive policies. To correct economic inequality, governments can implement progressive fiscal policies, such as higher taxes on the richest and cash transfers to the poorest, or social welfare programs, such as subsidies for housing, healthcare, and education. 5. Promotion of competition. The government can encourage competition in markets where there are monopolies or oligopolies by means of antitrust laws, supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, and ensuring that consumers have access to competitive prices. Conclusion. Market failures occur when markets do not allocate resources efficiently, resulting in a loss of social welfare and an unequal distribution of resources. The main failures include monopolies, externalities, public goods, imperfect information, and economic inequality. Through government interventions such as regulation, taxation, subsidies, and the provision of public goods, these failures can be corrected and the efficiency and equity of the economy can be improved. 14. Elasticities, measurement and applications. In this chapter, we will explore the concept of elasticity, a fundamental tool in microeconomics for measuring how quantities demanded or supplied respond to changes in prices, income, or the prices of other goods. Elasticity is a crucial concept for understanding the sensitivity of the market to variations and is useful for both consumers and producers when making economic decisions. What is elasticity? Elasticity measures the response of an economic variable to a change in another variable. In the context of microeconomics, the most common elasticities are: 1. Price elasticity of demand measures the sensitivity of the quantity demanded of a good to a change in its price. 2. Price elasticity of supply measures the sensitivity of the quantity supplied of a good to a change in its price. 3. Income elasticity of demand measures the sensitivity of the quantity demanded of a good to a change in consumer income. 4. Cross-price elasticity of demand. This measures how the quantity demanded of a good changes in response to a change in the price of a related good, whether a substitute or a complement. Price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand, PD, is probably the best known and refers to the relationship between a change in the price of a good and the change in the quantity demanded of that good. Price elasticity of demand formula. The basic formula for calculating the price elasticity of demand is: if the value of the elasticity is greater than 1, demand is elastic, which means that consumers are very sensitive to price changes. A small decrease in price causes a large increase in the quantity demanded. Less than 1, demand is inelastic, which means that consumers are not very sensitive to price changes. Even a large variation in price does not generate a significant change in the quantity demanded. Equal to 1, demand is unitary, which means that the percentage change in the quantity demanded is proportional to the change in price. Factors affecting the price elasticity of demand. 1. Availability of substitutes. If there are substitute products nearby, demand will be more elastic, as consumers can easily switch to a substitute if the price goes up. 2. Necessity versus luxury. Basic necessities, such as bread or electricity, tend to have inelastic demand, as people cannot do without them even if prices go up. By contrast, luxury goods tend to have a more elastic demand. 3. Proportion of income spent on the good. If a good represents a significant proportion of a person's income, such as a car, its demand will be more elastic. If the good represents a small fraction of income, such as a pen, demand will be inelastic. 4. Time. The elasticity of demand can change over time. In the short term, consumers may be less sensitive to price changes, but in the long term they may find more alternatives or adjust their habits. Supply-side price elasticity. Supply price elasticity measures the response of producers to a change in the price of a good. It is calculated in a similar way to demand elasticity, and its formula is: if the value of the elasticity is greater than 1, supply is elastic, which means that producers can easily increase the quantity supplied when the price rises. Less than 1, supply is inelastic, which means that producers cannot greatly increase the quantity supplied even if the price rises. Equal to 1, supply is unitary, which means that the percentage change in the quantity supplied is proportional to the change in the price. Factors affecting the price elasticity of supply. 1. Time. In the short term, supply tends to be more inelastic as companies cannot adjust their production levels quickly. In the long term, supply tends to be more elastic as companies can expand their production capacity. 2. Production capacity. If a company has additional production capacity, it can respond more easily to a price increase, making supply more elastic. 3. Availability of resources. If the resources needed to produce a good are easily accessible, supply will be more elastic. If resources are limited or difficult to obtain, supply will be inelastic. Cross-elasticity of demand. Cross-elasticity of demand measures the response of the quantity demanded of a good to a change in the price of a related good, whether a substitute or complement. Positive cross-elasticity. If the price of one good increases and the demand for another good also increases, these goods are substitutes. For example, if the price of beef increases, the demand for chicken may increase. Negative cross-elasticity. If the price of one good increases and the demand for another good decreases, these goods are complementary. For example, if the price of gasoline increases, the demand for cars may decrease. Income elasticity of demand. The income elasticity of demand measures the response of the quantity demanded of a good to a change in consumer income. This elasticity is classified as follows. Normal goods. If the income elasticity is positive, the good is a normal good, which means that its demand increases as income increases. Inferior goods. If income elasticity is negative, the good is an inferior good, which means that demand for it decreases as income increases. For example, instant noodles. Applications of elasticity in economic policy. Elasticity has numerous applications in economic policy. Some of the key areas where elasticity is important include 1. Fiscal policy. Governments use knowledge about the price elasticity of demand to set taxes and determine how they will affect consumer decisions. If a good has inelastic demand, the government can impose higher taxes without significantly reducing the quantity demanded. 2. Monopolies and prices. Monopolists can use elasticity to maximize their profits. If demand is elastic, they can reduce prices to increase sales. If it is inelastic, they can increase prices to maximize income. 3. International markets. Governments and businesses can use the cross-elasticity of demand to understand how changes in the prices of foreign products can affect the demand for domestic products. Conclusion. Elasticity is a fundamental tool in economics that allows us to measure how quantities demanded or supplied respond to changes in price, income, or the prices of related goods. The concepts of price elasticity of demand and supply, cross-price elasticity of demand, and income elasticity of demand provide key information on how markets react to economic changes. Understanding elasticity is essential for making economic and business policy decisions, as well as for understanding how market forces affect the well-being of consumers and producers. In the next chapter, we will delve deeper into the national accounts and the macroeconomic model, analyzing how economic activity is measured at the country level and the main tools that governments use to manage the economy. 15. The national accounts and the macroeconomic model. In this chapter, we will address the concept of national accounts, which are a set of macroeconomic statistics used to measure the economic activity of a country as a whole. The national accounts provide key information about the performance of an economy, such as the gross domestic product, GDP, the national income, and other indicators that allow the economic health of a country to be evaluated. In addition, we will explore the macroeconomic model, which explains how the different sectors of the economy interact to determine the level of production, employment, and prices. What are the national accounts? The national accounts are a set of accounting records that describe the production and use of goods and services in an economy over a given period of time, usually a year or a quarter. The national accounts provide a complete picture of the economy, allowing economists and governments to analyze economic activity and make informed decisions about economic policies. Gross domestic product, GDP. Gross domestic product, GDP, is the main indicator of a country's economic activity. It represents the total value of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders in a given period of time. There are three main methods for calculating GDP. 1. Production or value-added method. GDP is calculated by adding up the value added by all the companies that produce goods and services within the economy. This value added is the value of a sector's production minus the value of the inputs used in that production. 2. Income method. GDP is calculated by adding up all income generated by the production of goods and services, including workers' wages, company profits, rents, and interest on capital. 3. Expenditure method. GDP is calculated by adding up all expenditure on final goods and services by households, businesses, government, and the rest of the world. This is the most commonly used approach and is expressed as
where.
C equals private consumption, household expenditure. I equals private investment, business expenditure on capital. G equals public expenditure, government expenditure on goods and services. X equals exports. M equals imports. The term XM is the net balance of exports and imports, also known as net exports. Types of GDP. Nominal GDP, the value of the production of goods and services at current market prices. Real GDP, the value of production adjusted for inflation. This indicator is more useful for measuring a country's real economic growth, as it eliminates the effect of changes in prices. GDP per capita, GDP divided by the total population of a country, which gives a measure of the average income per person in the economy. Limitations of GDP. Although GDP is a key indicator of economic activity, it has several limitations. 1. It does not measure income distribution. An increase in GDP may not reflect improvements in well-being if incomes are unevenly distributed. 2. It does not consider externalities. GDP does not take into account the negative effects of production, such as pollution, nor the benefits of public goods such as health and education. 3. It does not measure quality of life. GDP does not reflect factors such as health, education, equal opportunities, or the quality of the environment. National income. National income refers to the total income that residents of a country receive from their productive activities. This includes not only income generated within the country, but also income received from other countries, minus income sent by foreigners residing in the country. The national income includes components such as labor income, income derived from work, such as wages and salaries, capital income, income derived from capital ownership, such as corporate profits, interest, and dividends, land income, income derived from the ownership of natural resources, such as land rent or rents. Net national income is national income adjusted for capital depreciation, which represents the value of resources that are worn out or depleted during the production process. The macroeconomic model. The macroeconomic model describes how the different sectors of the economy, consumers, businesses, government, foreign sector, interact to determine the level of production, employment, and prices in an economy. The most commonly used basic model is the aggregate supply and demand model, which explains the equilibrium between aggregate demand, the total quantity of goods and services demanded in the economy, and aggregate supply, the total quantity of goods and services produced in the economy. Aggregate demand, AD. Aggregate demand is the sum of all spending in the economy, including household consumption, business investment, government spending, and net exports, exports minus imports. Aggregate demand is influenced by factors such as price level. An increase in the general price level tends to reduce aggregate demand, as consumers have less purchasing power. Fiscal policy. Public spending and taxation affect aggregate demand. An increase in public spending or a reduction in taxes can increase aggregate demand. Monetary policy. The supply of money and interest rates, determined by the central bank, influence consumption and investment, affecting aggregate demand. Aggregate supply, AS. Aggregate supply is the total quantity of goods and services that companies are willing to produce at different price levels. In the long term, aggregate supply is determined by the productive capacity of the economy, such as the capital stock, technology, and labor force. Aggregate supply can be influenced by factors such as production costs. An increase in input costs, such as wages or raw material prices, can reduce aggregate supply. Technological progress. Improvements in technology increase productivity, which can increase aggregate supply. Inflation expectations. If producers anticipate an increase in inflation, they can adjust prices and production accordingly. Macroeconomic equilibrium. Macroeconomic equilibrium is reached when aggregate demand equals aggregate supply. At this point, the economy is producing at its potential level or full employment GDP, and there is no inflationary pressure or involuntary unemployment. Economic expansion. If aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, the economy experiences economic growth and increases production and employment, which can generate inflationary pressures. Economic recession. If aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, the economy enters a recession, leading to a fall in production and employment. Conclusion. National accounts are essential tools for measuring a country's economic activity, and GDP is one of the most important indicators for evaluating the performance of the economy. The macroeconomic model explains how the different sectors of the economy interact to determine the level of production, employment, and prices. Fiscal and monetary policies play a crucial role in the adjustment of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, seeking to achieve economic equilibrium and full employment. In the next chapter, we will explore the public sector, its functions and fiscal policy, which are key to understanding how governments manage the economy and affect the well-being of citizens. 16. The public sector, functions and fiscal policy. In this chapter, we will explore the role of the public sector in the economy and how the government intervenes through fiscal policies to influence economic and social well-being. The public sector includes both central and local governments and plays a key role in the distribution of resources, the redistribution of income, and the provision of public goods and services. Functions of the public sector. The public sector has various functions that go beyond the simple administration of the country. Among the most important functions are 1. Provision of public goods. Public goods are those that are non-excludable and non-rival in consumption. This means that once a public good is produced, no one can be excluded from its use, and one person's consumption does not reduce the amount available to others. Examples of public goods include national defense, public lighting, education, and health. The reason why the public sector provides these goods is that the market cannot do so efficiently. In many cases, consumers are not willing to pay for these goods because they can enjoy them without directly contributing to the cost, a phenomenon known as the free rider problem. Thus, the government finances these goods through taxes to ensure that everyone has access to them. 2. Income redistribution. The government plays a key role in redistributing wealth within society, seeking to reduce economic inequalities. This is achieved through the implementation of progressive tax systems, where people with higher incomes pay a higher proportion of their income in taxes. The resources collected through taxes are allocated to social programs such as pensions, housing subsidies, public health, and education, which benefit people with lower incomes. 3. Market regulation. The public sector intervenes to regulate markets and correct market failures. These failures include monopolies, externalities, imperfect information, and public goods. Regulations may be necessary to guarantee fair competition, protect the consumer, preserve the environment, and ensure the welfare of society in general. 4. Economic stabilization. The public sector also has a responsibility to stabilize the economy. This is achieved through economic policies such as fiscal policy, public spending and taxes, and monetary policy, control of the money supply, and interest rates. The aim is to reduce economic fluctuations, such as recessions and excessive economic expansions, in order to maintain a sustainable rate of economic growth. Fiscal policy, public spending, and taxes. Fiscal policy refers to government decisions on public spending and tax collection. Fiscal policy has a direct impact on the economy as it influences aggregate demand, the level of employment, income distribution, and economic stability. Public spending. Public spending is a key tool of fiscal policy and includes all purchases and payments made by the government to finance projects, services, and programs. Public spending is divided into several categories. 1. Current expenditure. This is the expenditure allocated to maintaining government operations and public services. It includes the payment of salaries to public employees, spending on health, education, and other basic services, as well as the payment of interest on the public debt. 2. Capital expenditure. This is expenditure on investment in infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, hospitals, schools, etc. This type of expenditure seeks to promote long-term economic growth. 3. Transfers and subsidies. The government also makes direct transfers to households, such as pensions, unemployment benefits, and social assistance. These payments are not in exchange for goods or services and are intended to improve the welfare of the population, especially those with lower incomes. Taxes. The government raises revenue mainly through taxes. Taxes can be classified into two broad groups. 1. Direct taxes. These are taxes that are applied directly to the income or wealth of individuals or companies. Income tax is the most common example of a direct tax. 2. Indirect taxes. These are taxes that are applied to the consumption of goods and services. VAT, value-added tax, is an example of an indirect tax. Progressive taxes are those in which tax rates increase as income increases. This helps to reduce economic inequality, as people with higher incomes contribute more to the financing of public goods and services. Fiscal deficit and public debt. A fiscal deficit occurs when public spending exceeds government tax revenues in a given period. If the government spends more than it collects, it must finance the difference through loans, which leads to an increase in public debt. High public debt can raise concerns about fiscal sustainability, as the government must pay interest on the debt and, ultimately, repay the principal. However, a fiscal deficit can also be a useful tool in situations of economic recession when the government increases spending to stimulate the economy. Impact of fiscal policy on the economy. Fiscal policy has various effects on the economy, depending on how spending and taxes are used. 1. Stimulation of aggregate demand. During periods of economic recession, the government can increase public spending and reduce taxes to stimulate aggregate demand, which boosts economic growth and reduces unemployment. 2. Inflation control. In times of excessive economic expansion, the government can reduce public spending or increase taxes to cool the economy and control inflation. 3. Income redistribution. Fiscal policy also has an impact on income distribution. Through a system of progressive taxation and transfers, the government can reduce economic inequalities and ensure that resources are distributed more equitably. The role of government in economic growth and stability. The government plays a fundamental role in economic stabilization and in the promotion of sustainable growth. Fiscal policies are one of the main tools for achieving these objectives. A government that adopts prudent fiscal policies can help to reduce economic fluctuations, promote a more equitable distribution of resources, and ensure an environment conducive to long-term economic development. Conclusion. The public sector has key functions in the economy, ranging from the provision of public goods to income redistribution and economic stabilization. Fiscal policy, made up of public spending and tax collection, is a fundamental tool for achieving these objectives. Proper use of fiscal policy can improve social welfare, reduce inequality, and promote sustainable economic growth. In the next chapter, we will take a closer look at money and monetary policy, exploring how the money supply and interest rates affect the economy and consumers' purchasing power. 17. Money and monetary policy. In this chapter, we will explore the concept of money and the crucial role it plays in the economy, as well as the monetary policy tools used by central banks to control the money supply and interest rates, with the aim of maintaining economic stability, growth, and employment. What is money? Money is a generally accepted medium of exchange for the purchase of goods and services, as well as for the payment of debts. In addition to its function as a medium of exchange, money fulfills three essential functions. 1. Unit of account. Money serves as a standard for measuring the value of goods and services, allowing consumers and producers to compare prices. 2. Medium of exchange. Money facilitates the exchange of goods and services, eliminating the need for a barter system. 3. Store of value. Money allows people to store their wealth and purchasing power for future use. However, the effectiveness of money as a store of value depends on price stability. Money can take different forms, such as cash, coins and notes issued by the central government, bank deposits, money kept in bank accounts, accessible through checks or cards, electronic money, digitally represented money, which allows transactions through online platforms. The banking system and the creation of money. The banking system plays a fundamental role in the creation of money. Although central banks issue physical money, commercial banks have the capacity to create money through loans. This process is known as the money multiplier. When a commercial bank grants a loan, it creates money in the form of deposits in the borrower's accounts. These deposits can be used to make payments, which generates an increase in the money supply in the economy. The money multiplier describes how an increase in initial bank deposits can generate a much larger increase in the total amount of money in circulation. This phenomenon is limited by fractional reserve banking, which requires banks to keep a fraction of deposits as reserves and lend out the rest. Monetary policy. Tools and objectives. Monetary policy is the set of measures adopted by the central bank to control the money supply and interest rates in order to achieve key economic objectives, such as controlling inflation, economic stability, and promoting growth and employment. Monetary policy objectives. 1. Control inflation. One of the main objectives of monetary policy is to keep inflation within a stable range. Too high inflation can erode the purchasing power of money, while too low inflation can signal a lack of demand and a possible recession. 2. Promoting employment. The central bank seeks to maintain a high and stable employment rate. Excessive unemployment can generate social and economic tensions, while full employment is ideal for economic growth. 3. Financial stability. Monetary policy also seeks to maintain financial stability, preventing financial markets from experiencing extreme volatility that could affect the economic system in general. Monetary policy tools. Central banks use a range of tools to implement monetary policy. The main tools are: 1. Interest rates. The central bank sets the interest rate at which commercial banks can borrow money from the central bank. This type of rate influences the cost of borrowing in the economy. When interest rates are low, borrowing is cheaper, which encourages spending and investment. Conversely, when interest rates are high, borrowing becomes more expensive, which reduces spending and investment. Benchmark interest rate. This is the rate at which the central bank lends money to commercial banks. This type of rate influences the interest rates that commercial banks offer to consumers and businesses. 2. Open market operations. These are the central bank's purchases and sales of government securities, such as government bonds. When the central bank buys bonds, it increases the amount of money in circulation, which can stimulate spending and investment. If the central bank sells bonds, it reduces the amount of money in circulation, which can help curb inflation. 3. Reserve requirements. Central banks can modify the reserve requirement ratio, which is the fraction of deposits that commercial banks must maintain as reserves. If the central bank reduces this requirement, commercial banks have more capacity to lend money, which increases the money supply. 4. Lending facility. Some central banks offer loans directly to financial institutions under special conditions, which ensures that there is sufficient liquidity in the financial system in times of need. Types of monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy. This is implemented when the central bank seeks to increase the money supply and reduce interest rates to stimulate spending and investment in the economy. This is done by reducing interest rates or by purchasing financial assets, open market operations. Expansionary monetary policy is commonly used during periods of recession or economic slowdown. 2. Contractionary monetary policy. This is implemented when the central bank seeks to reduce the money supply and increase interest rates to curb spending and investment, with the aim of controlling inflation. This is generally done through the sale of financial assets and an increase in interest rates. Contractionary monetary policy is used when the economy is experiencing high inflation. The effect of monetary policy on the economy. Monetary policy has direct and indirect effects on the economy. 1. Effects on consumption and investment. By modifying interest rates, the central bank can directly affect the cost of credit, which influences household consumption and business investment. Low interest rates encourage consumption and investment, while high rates discourage them. 2. Effects on employment. An expansionary monetary policy can reduce interest rates, which stimulates the demand for goods and services, promoting job creation. On the contrary, a contractionary monetary policy can increase interest rates, cooling the economy and reducing job creation. 3. Effects on inflation. Monetary policy also has a direct impact on prices. Expansionary monetary policy tends to increase the demand for goods and services, which can generate inflationary pressures. On the contrary, a contractionary monetary policy reduces demand, helping to control inflation. Conclusion: money and monetary policy are fundamental to the functioning of the economy. The central bank uses various tools to control the money supply and interest rates with the aim of maintaining economic stability, promoting growth, and controlling inflation. Monetary policy decisions affect both consumers and businesses, influencing spending, investment, and employment. In the next chapter, we will look at inflation, its causes, its effects on the economy, and the policies that can be applied to control it. 18. Inflation, causes and effects. Inflation is one of the most important economic phenomena and often one of the most worrying for governments, businesses, and consumers. In this chapter, we will explore what inflation is, its main causes, its effects on the economy, and how policies can be implemented to control it. What is inflation? Inflation is the generalized and sustained increase in the prices of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. Inflation reduces the purchasing power of money, which means that with the same amount of money, consumers can buy fewer goods and services than before. The Consumer Price Index, CPI, is one of the most commonly used indicators for measuring inflation. This index calculates the change in the prices of a representative set of goods and services consumed by households, such as food, housing, transportation, and medical care. Causes of inflation. Inflation can be caused by several factors. Economists generally classify the causes of inflation into two broad categories: demand inflation and cost inflation. 1. Demand inflation. Demand inflation occurs when the total demand for goods and services in an economy exceeds its production capacity. In other words, when there is excess demand in relation to available supply, prices tend to rise. This can happen for various reasons, such as increase in public spending. An increase in government spending, such as on infrastructure or social programs, can increase aggregate demand, which puts pressure on prices. Increase in private consumption. If consumers have higher incomes, for example, due to an increase in wages or expansionary fiscal policies such as tax cuts, they tend to spend more, which can increase aggregate demand. Increased business investment. When companies invest more in capital, such as factories, machinery, technology, demand for goods and services increases, which can lead to a rise in prices if supply is not adjusted accordingly. Excess monetary supply. If the central bank excessively increases the money supply through expansionary monetary policies, this can generate an increase in spending and demand, causing inflation. 2. Cost inflation. Cost inflation occurs when production costs increase, which leads producers to raise the prices of goods and services to maintain their profit margins. The main causes of cost inflation include increase in the prices of raw materials. If the price of natural resources such as oil, metals, or food increases, production costs increase, which can lead to an increase in the final prices of products. Increase in wages. If wages increase, labor costs increase, which can induce companies to raise prices to compensate for these additional costs. Malfunctions in the supply chain. A shortage of inputs or an interruption in the supply chain due to natural disasters, geopolitical conflicts, or health crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic can cause production costs to rise, which generates inflationary pressures. Currency devaluation. If a country's currency loses value against other foreign currencies, imported goods become more expensive, increasing the production costs of products that depend on imported inputs. 3. Self-fulfilling inflation. Self-fulfilling inflation or expectations inflation occurs when consumers and producers expect prices to increase in the future, which leads to an anticipated increase in current prices. For example, if workers expect inflation to increase, they may ask for higher wages, which in turn increases production costs and generates a cycle of inflation. Effects of inflation. Inflation has various effects on the economy, some positive and others negative. The most important effects are analyzed below. Negative effects of inflation. 1. Reduction of purchasing power. The most obvious effect of inflation is that it reduces the purchasing power of money. When prices rise, consumers can buy fewer goods and services with the same amount of money. 2. Distortion of relative prices. Inflation can make it more difficult for consumers and businesses to make rational economic decisions as the relative prices of goods and services become distorted. For example, the prices of some products may increase faster than those of others, creating uncertainty in the markets. 3. Increased economic uncertainty. When inflation is high or uncontrolled, consumers and businesses may become more cautious and reduce spending or investment. Uncertainty about future prices can make decision-making difficult and affect economic activity. 4. Economic inequality. Inflation affects different groups in society differently. People on fixed incomes, such as pensioners or low-wage workers, are the most affected, as they cannot adjust their purchasing power quickly enough to keep up with price rises. 5. Impact on savings. Inflation can reduce the real value of money saved. If savings are not invested in instruments that generate a return higher than the rate of inflation, the real value of the money saved decreases over time. Positive effects of moderate inflation. 1. Incentive to invest and spend. Moderate inflation can encourage consumers to spend and invest rather than keeping their money in cash, as higher prices in the future can make goods more expensive. 2. Reduction of the debt burden. For borrowers, inflation can reduce the real value of the debt. If a person or company has a fixed-rate debt, inflation causes the real value of the debt to decrease, as the money paid in the future has less value. 3. Adjustment of wages and prices. In an economy with moderate inflation, wages can be adjusted to reflect the increase in prices, which can help avoid rigidity in labor markets. Inflation control, policies, and strategies. Governments and central banks implement various policies to control inflation and keep it within a healthy range. The main strategies include: 1. Contractionary monetary policy. The central bank can raise interest rates to reduce the supply of money in the economy. This can discourage spending and investment, which helps to reduce inflation. 2. Contractionary fiscal policy. The government can reduce public spending or raise taxes to reduce aggregate demand, which helps to control inflation. 3. Price and wage controls. In some cases, the government can impose direct controls on prices and wages to curb inflation. However, this measure can have negative long-term effects, such as product shortages or the creation of parallel markets. 4. Exchange rate policy. The government can intervene in the currency markets to control the depreciation of the currency, which can help reduce imported inflation. Conclusion: inflation is an economic phenomenon that affects purchasing power, relative prices, investment, and social welfare. Its main causes include excess demand, rising production costs, and consumer expectations. While moderate inflation can have some positive effects, such as encouraging spending and investment in assets, high inflation can be detrimental to the economy. Governments and central banks use tools such as monetary and fiscal policy to control inflation and maintain economic stability. In the next chapter, we will explore the economic challenges of unemployment and its relationship to inflation, analyzing how both phenomena affect macroeconomic policies and people's quality of life. 19. Unemployment and inflation, the economic challenges. In this chapter, we will address two of the most critical economic problems facing modern economies: unemployment and inflation. Although the two phenomena are interrelated, they have different causes and effects on the economy. Understanding their relationship and the challenges they present is essential for designing effective economic policies that promote stability, growth, and the well-being of society. What is unemployment? Unemployment refers to the condition in which a person who is available for work, wants to work, and is actively seeking employment cannot find it. There are different types of unemployment, which are classified according to their causes. Types of unemployment. 1. Frictional unemployment. This is the type of unemployment that occurs when people are in transition between jobs or are new to the labor market. This type of unemployment is generally short-lived and is considered natural, as there will always be people changing jobs, moving, or looking for work in new industries. 2. Structural unemployment. This occurs when there is a mismatch between the skills of workers and the needs of the labor market. This type of unemployment is more long-lasting and is due to factors such as technological changes, changes in the demand for products and services, or the restructuring of the economy. An example is when workers in an obsolete industry do not have the skills necessary to work in newer or more technological industries. 3. Cyclical unemployment. This type of unemployment is related to fluctuations in the economy. In periods of recession or low economic growth rates, aggregate demand decreases, leading to a reduction in production and, therefore, to the dismissal of workers. Cyclical unemployment tends to increase during economic crises and to decrease when the economy recovers. 4. Seasonal unemployment. This occurs when seasonal fluctuations in the demand for goods and services affect certain sectors, such as agriculture, tourism, or construction. This type of unemployment is common in certain industries at certain times of the year. The impact of unemployment. Unemployment has negative effects at both the individual and social level. 1. Economic impact. Unemployment represents a loss of production and a decrease in national income. When people are not working, disposable income and consumption are reduced, which in turn affects aggregate demand. Consequently, unemployment leads to a decline in productivity and economic growth. 2. Social impact. High unemployment can generate social and political tensions, affect the morale of workers, and contribute to economic inequality. Unemployed people often face economic hardship, which can lead to greater poverty, insecurity, and, in some cases, psychological problems. 3. Unemployment and inflation. Unemployment has a complex relationship with inflation. According to the Phillips curve, in general, when unemployment is low, inflation tends to be higher as the increase in the demand for goods and services drives up prices. On the contrary, when unemployment is high, inflation tends to decrease as there is less pressure on prices due to lower demand. What is inflation? Inflation is the widespread and sustained increase in the prices of goods and services in an economy. A moderate level of inflation is common in growing economies, but very high inflation or hyperinflation can have destructive effects. The relationship between inflation and unemployment is fundamental to economic policy, and understanding it can help economists make decisions about the type of measures to implement. The relationship between unemployment and inflation, the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve is a graphical representation of the inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. According to this theory, when unemployment is low, inflation tends to be higher, and when unemployment is high, inflation tends to be lower. Why does this relationship occur? 1. Low unemployment and high inflation. When the unemployment rate is low, there are fewer people available to work. This can make it difficult for companies to find workers, leading to wage increases. These wage increases can be passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices, causing inflation. 2. High unemployment and low inflation. When the unemployment rate is high, companies have a greater supply of available workers, allowing them to keep wages relatively low. This reduces pressures on prices, resulting in lower inflation. Factors affecting the Phillips curve. The relationship between unemployment and inflation is not fixed, as it can be altered by various factors, such as inflation expectations. If workers and companies expect prices to rise, they can adjust their wage demands and the prices of goods, which can generate an inflationary spiral, even if unemployment is high. Supply shocks. Factors such as increases in input prices or external shocks, for example, a sudden increase in the price of oil, can affect both inflation and unemployment, shifting the Phillips curve. Economic policy. Unemployment and inflation. The relationship between unemployment and inflation poses challenges for economic policy. Central banks and governments must balance their policies to effectively address both problems. Monetary policy and unemployment/inflation. In a recessionary economy, the central bank can adopt an expansionary monetary policy, reducing interest rates to encourage spending and investment. This can reduce unemployment, but it can also generate inflationary pressures if demand increases too much. In a high-inflation economy, the central bank can adopt a contractionary monetary policy, raising interest rates to cool demand and reduce inflation. However, this can lead to increased unemployment as lower demand can reduce production and hiring. Fiscal policy and unemployment/inflation. In times of high inflation, the government can adopt a contractionary fiscal policy, reducing public spending or increasing taxes to reduce aggregate demand and control prices. In times of high unemployment, the government can increase public spending or reduce taxes to stimulate demand and encourage job creation. Conclusion: unemployment and inflation are two of the biggest economic challenges facing economies. Both phenomena have different causes and effects, but they are closely related through the Phillips curve, which describes the inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. Fiscal and monetary policies must find a balance to address these problems without generating negative long-term effects. High unemployment can have a devastating impact on the economy, while out-of-control inflation can erode purchasing power and create uncertainty. In the next chapter, we will explore the tools and objectives of economic policy and how governments use fiscal and monetary policies to manage the economy and improve social welfare. 20. Economic policy, tools and objectives. In this chapter, we will explore the main tools and objectives of economic policy, both fiscal and monetary, and how governments and central banks use them to manage economic challenges such as unemployment, inflation, growth, and economic stability. Economic policy decisions are crucial to achieving social welfare and maintaining a healthy economy in the long term. What is economic policy? Economic policy is the set of measures adopted by the government and monetary authorities, such as the central bank, to influence the performance of the economy. These policies seek to achieve objectives such as price stability, controlling inflation, full employment, sustainable economic growth, equitable distribution of income, financial stability. To achieve these objectives, two main types of policies are employed: fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal policy, public spending and taxes. Fiscal policy is the part of economic policy that refers to the use of public spending and taxes by the government to influence the economy. Fiscal policy tools. 1. Public spending. The government can increase or reduce spending on goods and services. Increasing public spending on infrastructure, education, health, etc. can stimulate aggregate demand and reduce unemployment. On the other hand, reducing public spending can cool the economy and control inflation. 2. Taxes. Taxes are a way for the government to collect money to finance its activities. Progressive taxes, which increase as income increases, help to redistribute wealth, while regressive taxes, such as VAT, proportionally affect low-income households more. Changing taxes is a key way to influence consumption and investment. 3. Transfers and subsidies. The government can also redistribute wealth through direct transfers to the population, such as pensions, unemployment benefits, social benefits, to reduce inequalities and stimulate demand from the most vulnerable households. Objectives of fiscal policy. 1. Stimulate economic growth. During a recession or economic slowdown, the government can increase public spending or reduce taxes to encourage consumption and investment, which stimulates economic activity. 2. Control inflation. If the economy is experiencing high inflation, the government can reduce public spending or increase taxes to decrease aggregate demand and curb inflationary pressures. 3. Promoting equity and social justice. Through a system of progressive taxation and transfer programs, the government can redistribute resources and reduce economic inequalities. 4. Maintaining fiscal stability. The government must ensure that the level of spending does not exceed its income, as a prolonged fiscal deficit can generate unsustainable debt, affecting economic stability and increasing financial costs. Monetary policy. Control of the money supply and interest rates. Monetary policy is the set of measures adopted by the central bank to influence the money supply and interest rates in order to maintain economic stability. The central bank has several tools at its disposal to carry out this policy. Monetary policy tools. 1. Interest rates. The central bank can modify interest rates to influence the cost of money. When interest rates are low, credit and spending are encouraged. On the contrary, high interest rates discourage indebtedness and consumption, which helps to control inflation. 2. Open market operations. Open market operations are the purchases and sales of government securities carried out by the central bank. When the central bank buys securities, it increases the amount of money in circulation, which can stimulate the economy. By selling securities, the central bank reduces the amount of money in circulation, which can help control inflation. 3. Reserve requirements. The central bank can modify the ratio of required reserves that banks must maintain. By reducing reserve requirements, the ability of banks to lend money is increased, which increases the money supply. 4. Lending facility. The central bank can also offer short-term loans to commercial banks to ensure that there is sufficient liquidity in the financial system. Objectives of monetary policy. 1. Control inflation. The central bank seeks to keep inflation within a stable and controlled range. If inflation is too high, the central bank can raise interest rates to cool the economy and reduce pressure on prices. 2. Foster economic growth. When the economy is slowing down, the central bank can lower interest rates and increase the money supply to encourage consumption and investment, thus stimulating economic growth. 3. Maintain financial stability. Through monetary policy, the central bank works to prevent financial crises and ensure that credit and payment systems function efficiently. 4. Promoting employment. On some occasions, central banks adopt policies to reduce unemployment, seeking a balance between employment and prices. However, monetary policies that favor employment can generate inflationary pressures if they are not handled with care. Interaction between fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal and monetary policies do not operate in isolation. They must work together to achieve economic stability. However, in some cases, they may have contradictory objectives. Expansionary fiscal policy, higher public spending or tax cuts, can generate inflationary pressures if the economy is already close to maximum capacity. In this case, a contractionary monetary policy, increase in interest rates, may be necessary to control inflation. Contractionary fiscal policy, reducing public spending or increasing taxes, can slow economic growth. To counteract this effect, the central bank could implement an expansionary monetary policy, reducing interest rates to encourage investment and consumption. Conclusion. Economic policy is crucial for the well-being of a nation, and both fiscal and monetary policy have powerful tools to influence the economy. Fiscal policy, through public spending and taxation, seeks to manage aggregate demand, redistribute wealth, and control the fiscal deficit. On the other hand, monetary policy focuses on controlling the money supply and interest rates with the aim of maintaining price stability and economic growth. The challenge for economic policymakers is to find a balance between these tools in order to achieve the objectives of full employment, price stability, and sustained economic growth, while minimizing the risks of inflation or recession. In the next chapter, we will analyze how governments and central banks face economic challenges and how their policies affect citizens and businesses. In this journey through the fundamental concepts of economics, we have explored how the different elements interact to form the framework of what we know as economics. From the definition of economics as a social science to the analysis of complex phenomena such as unemployment and inflation, we have covered a great deal of information that allows us to better understand the forces that shape our lives and our economic decisions. This book is a long summary we have produced to facilitate the understanding of key concepts that are fundamental both for those who are beginning to explore the economy and for those who seek to deepen their understanding. The tools of economic policy, the relationship between unemployment and inflation, and strategies for managing economic cycles are just some of the topics that can help each of us understand how markets operate and what measures can be taken to improve our economic situation and that of society. If you have found this content useful, we invite you to subscribe to the Audiomentors channel, where you'll find more educational material that will help you understand the world of economics, finance, and other key topics for your personal and professional growth. Thank you for joining us on this learning journey. We hope to see you soon with more content that will continue to enrich your knowledge.